Welcome everyone. If anybody joins later on, then I guess they'll continue from wherever they find us. But yeah, we are going to just give a little recap on what we did last week in week 2, and then do the slides for this week, and then get into the lab session, the lab practice for this week as well. This is week 3. So week 2, we started looking at basic structure of HTML. We introduced what HTML is. I talked about how HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and that is the standard language for creating web pages. Use it to structure content. Is like the backbone, the very skeleton of your web page. We looked at a basic structure. We talked about the doc type HTML declaration, the HTML tags, what are tags. We looked at the head tag. Inside the head tag, what is in the head tag? We have title, we have meta that contains some metadata about your page. This is important for things like search engine optimization. We talked about the body tag and what is the body tag inside the body. What does the body tag contains? We talked about different elements, text elements, heading H1 to H6, which are our heading elements. We talked about paragraph. We talked about div and span. We talked about line breaks. We talked about lists in HTML, ordered list and unordered lists. We also treated links for navigating between pages. And then we talked about semantic and non-semantic elements. Semantic elements, they give more meaning to your elements. And this is good for on-screen readers, like visually impaired people, or say for search engine optimization on your browser, how your site would perform. Then I also got people up to date with Visual Studio Code, setting it up, downloading, installing, and trying to write your first code and building out your page. And now this week, we are going to go more into HTML, that is other elements, forms, tables, and then semantic elements, because this is the whole point of modern HTML, HTML5. So we don't want to dwell too much on non-semantic elements. So now forms, the first topic. Forms basically allow you enter data and submit that data to somewhere. I know we've all seen forms. We all know what forms look like on your contact page. Mostly when you go to some websites, if you go to their contact page, they'll keep a form there for you to reach out to them or leave them a message. You've tried to log into something as well, or sign up for something. You would see enter your username or enter your email, enter your first name, enter your password. Those are all forms or form fields. And then you see a button to submit. Everything makes up a form. So forms can include text field, email fields, password fields, name it, radio buttons, check boxes, then a submit button. Some common HTML form elements. We have the main form elements, which is like a container for every other field that you are going to put inside, and we are going to do it in the lab shortly. We have the input elements. This input elements captures the user's inputs, and we have different types of input elements. We have one for capturing text, like maybe their first name and their last name. We have one for capturing password. Those ones by default, whatever you are typing on them will be hidden. You know, when you type your password and it's just ... circle dot showing and not the actual text you're writing. So you have to use a password input type. We have email, the ones for typing in emails. It recognizes only email. And if you type something that's not an email, it's going to flag that you're typing the wrong thing or you're trying to submit the wrong thing. We have number, so forms that will only capture numbers. We have a checkbox. We all know what a checkbox is. Those ones that you have to select, like you have to check one. We have radio drop downs. Oh, I forgot to add a select here, but we have a form called select. We have radio drop downs, all those ones that you can only pick one option. We have dates for maybe calendar. If you want to insert a calendar on your page for someone to maybe pick their date of birth, we have that. We have one for uploading a file. Then we have something called the label. This gives a label for your form. We have the button. The button is used to submit your form. Oh, select is here. I didn't even see that. We have select and option. And then we have text area for when you want to type like larger blocks of text. So an example of a basic form, remember I told you the form is like the container, right? And everything else is inside the form, the container. So the form is the house. So you can see everything is wrapped inside opening form and closing form. And then you have the label for name, and then the input type of text for your name. Then we break the line to give one space, and then we have the label for email, and then we have the input type of email. We break, and then we have submit. This is just a basic example. The label is very, very important. Again, it makes the input fields accessible. So you need to define what this input field is about. And you'll see this shortly. You're going to understand when we start to do the lab practice. And then we have something called form validation. It's very important. As much as when we enter backend, I'm going to teach you about validating requests that people make. As a front-end developer as well, or engineer, you have to also learn how to handle form validation from the front end. So even before they send that data to the back end, there's a way you can check on the front end to see if that data is still valid, is what is being expected from in the back end. And one easiest way to do it is by passing this keyword required to the inputs. But there are other ways to do it. You can use some libraries to do it. You can write some JavaScript code to do it as well. But one of the easiest ways is using required. And today we would use required. But as time goes on, when we get to JavaScript, I will show you the JavaScript implementation. When we get to maybe using other front-end libraries and frameworks, I'll also show you that implementation. But when you pass this required, the browser will automatically check to see if it's, maybe if you don't want them to submit an empty form field and you pass in required, before they can click that submit button, they must put something in that form field. Or if you want them to pass in a valid email, you can use the input type of email and you can pass in required and things like that. And we are going to see it shortly. Then we have some other attributes of our forms, something called the form action. This specifies where the data that you are passing into the form will be sent. So we are going to also get into this, especially when we are dealing with backend. You will understand more of this better, but basically you want to send this form somewhere, and this somewhere is what you have prepared on the back end. We call them APIs, application programming interface, but we are going to get into that. And we have different types of APIs, but one of the most popular ones is REST. So let's just say you have a REST API that you have prepared on the back end. You want to pass that into this action to submit your form through that API, and then it goes to store or retrieve something for you. Then we have the methods. These are called HTTP methods. We are also going to look more into this because they're important for you to know as a developer, but we have different types of HTTP methods. They are just transfer protocols. We have GET for retrieving something to be displayed on the front end. We have POST for posting something to the back end. We have DELETE, and we have other ones. We have PUT, we have patch, but one of the most popular ones are POST and GET, then maybe DELETE and PUT. PUT is for updating, DELETE is for deleting. So it determines how the data is sent. Required, we already looked at that. If you want if an input field to be mandatory, you pass in required, but this is just one way to do it. We have min length and max length. Then pattern as well. This one validates a specific format. For example, for phone numbers, the way our phone numbers have to start from like 08 something or 09 something, you can specify the pattern for a particular field. We have min and max. This one ensures that the input value is within a certain range. So this one is different from min length and max length. Max length is like when I'm typing, I should not type more than, maybe if I say 100, I should not type more than 100 things inside that input. While min and max is like a range. So in that form field now, if I put min 18 and max 100, it means that I cannot enter anything less than 18 and anything more than, like any number that is less than 18 and any number that is more than 100 in that form. Then we have radio. Radio button allows you to select only one option. Oops. We have checkbox. This one allows you to select multiple options. We have file. File allows you to upload a document or a file, and then reset just clears all the form fields. Usually you want to do this after someone has submitted the form. You want to clear all the form fields so that it's fresh again. And we have tables next. We said we're going to discuss tables today. Tables is for presentation, to present something better. You talked about lists the last time. That's one way to present things, but tables is another way to do that as well. So you can organize things even better with your tables and display things in rows and columns versus just putting them that way. So we have some common table elements. We have the table, which is like the main container. So I don't know if you are seeing a pattern here, like form has a main container called form. Now table has a main container called table. List also has a main container. If it's ordered list you are doing, the main container is OL. If it's unordered list, the main container is UL. So if you're seeing the pattern here, so table is the main container, the table tag, and then we have the table header, because usually when you look at a table, right, you usually notice that there are headings for each columns, right? You have the heading of the column, right, or the title of the column that you are trying to create. Then we have the table body. This one holds every other thing in the table, all of the cells and the rows. So inside the table body, we now have the table row. We then have the table heading, and then we have the table data cell. We are going to look at this more. We have things like col span, row span. These ones are used to merge columns and rows together, but we'll take a look shortly in the lab. But this is the basic example of a table, right? Table is my main container, and then I have my table head, and the names of the headings I want on my table is name and age. So name is going to be one column, age is going to be another column, two headings. And then I have my table body. So inside this table body, if I pass in John, it's automatically going to go on that name, and if I pass in 25, it's going to go on that age. I'll now create another one. Jane will go on that name, 30 will go on that, but these two by default will be bolder than these ones, because this one is under table head and this one is under normal table body, but you'll see it soon in action. And then we have merging tables and table cells together. You use col span and row span for this one. And this col span will expand a cell across multiple columns. So if you say col span of 2, it will make a cell take 2 columns. And again, we'll see this, how this works. Same thing with rows. You expand rows across a cell across multiple rows. Then last but not the least, we have semantic HTML. This is very important again. Last week we talked about this, and now we are looking at this again. Semantic elements helps you describe content meaning. It makes your website more readable, more accessible. Some common semantic elements we looked at article. Article basically defines a standalone content, like a blog post. You know, when you are on some of these websites, and by the side you will just see maybe some small boxes or some small tile, and it's just news, different news that are there. Something like that, you can use article to define a separate section of your page like that. Then we have section. This one groups related content together. It's almost like what our div would do for us initially. You know how we use div as containers to hold different chunks of content together? That's kind of what section would do now. Nav would define navigation links. So instead of just putting all your links in span, or in one big div or in ordinary li or something, just use nav. Put all your links in nav. It has more meaning. Header, the same thing. Usually when you visit websites, that we have like a top section here where maybe the logo will be and then other links will be. So the whole container like this, the whole top container is the header. And then footer, when you visit a website, there's usually a down section that is sectioned off as well with some extra information or links or copyrights information or something there. That's the footer. So using specific semantic elements with proper words and definition behind them and meaning behind them like this is better than just using div and styling div to look the way you want it to be. Ultimately, you achieve the same thing, but it doesn't have meaning, is not accessible, it doesn't perform that well when you talk of SEO, search engine optimization, or it doesn't rank well on the search engine as much as a properly defined element would rank. So some examples of semantic HTML, we have this one, we have the header. So instead of just saying div and h1, welcome to our website, we change it to header because it's going to be at the very top. And then we put in welcome to our website. We have the nav for our links here. Instead of just putting it in a div or a span, we put it in nav. Same thing with the main section. Instead of just putting it in a div, we put it in section. And inside this section, we have an article, and then we have our proper footer. So this is just a basic example, but you get the whole idea now of writing your web pages with semantic elements. And finally, we are going to be moving into our practical, but just to summarize, we've covered form and inputs. We talked about form validation. We talked about tables and presenting data on tables. We talked about semantic elements. And for the practical task, we are going to be looking at creating a contact form using form, inputs, label, button, text area, and the rest. We are going to look at creating a table. And then we are going to look at structuring a web page using semantic HTML, header, nav, section, footer, main, article, and the rest. Ignore this. We are not displaying a list of students because our website was on building like a landscape. So we are going to just fill this in with something else. But that brings us to the end of our slide. And I just wanted to know if anyone has any questions before we proceed. How many people were able to do something from last week? Anyone? Can anyone indicate if they were able to make any progress with what we did last week?
Yeah, I was able to do.
Oh, that's really nice. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I,
sorry, you said?
I was able to create a contact, the contact page. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to complete it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. Can everyone still see my screen? And it's moving. Okay. Yeah. So for this week, we are going to look at replacing some of the things we have here with semantic elements. We are going to look at forms, and then we are going to look at tables. I'll just start with the form. I'll build my own contact page right now on the screen and start with the form. And then we're going to move to tables, and then we are going to ultimately include semantic elements in the index.html that we did with non-semantic elements last week. So we said first and foremost, you do your doc type declaration rights, and then you pass in your HTML tag. You open your HTML tag, open and close. This houses everything. And the next step, of course, is the head tag, which we have, and then we also have our body tag, right? In the head tag, we have meta, and we specify our character sets. And we also have viewport. I said I was going to disable this assistant so it doesn't give me suggestions, because I feel like the suggestions might be confusing sometimes, but yeah, I forgot to disable it. And we also specify our device width. So that's the width it assumes when the page first loads. We want it to automatically pick the width of whatever device the person is working from, or is viewing from rather. An initial scale to 1.0, which is just 100%. Don't zoom in, don't zoom out, just leave 100%, keep the full website as it is. And then we talked about our title. And our title is contact us. Oh, did I say contact use? Yeah, so mine on the browser. and then view our contact page. So we've not really done anything, but we've just added the title, so it reflects here, right? So we've done that. Now to start building the body, every page you go to, you should be able to have a link to go back to other pages instead of using back button, right? So we are going to build our links, and then we are going to do one for, we have portfolio, and then we have portfolio, and then we have contacts, although this is contact page, but I just thought to still recreate the link. So this is our header tag, which is a semantic HTML tag, and nav is also a semantic HTML tag, and we are using this to create our links. Last week, if you remember, we just used span, but this wouldn't have meaning, but this definitely has meaning. So if I refresh, we can now see we have our 3 links, right? And it works just the same, just the difference is that it's better. That's the truth of the matter. It's better, it has more meaning, it's better for search engine optimization, it's better for accessibility needs and all of that. So you see how we can now navigate through all of our pages, right? So the next thing we'll be looking at building out is our main section after the header. This is where would now contain the rest of the content of the page. We are going to build a first section. This section will just be like a simple introduction to the page. Contact us. I'll just put a little text. We would love to hear from you. Fill out the form below to get in touch. Oh, there was a typo here. So if we refresh, we have it here. Would love to hear from you. Fill out the form below to get in touch. And now we'll start to build out our forms. So we could build the form right in this section. So we said you have to specify the form first, which is like the container to hold the rest of the inputs. And remember, we talked about label, where your label is like it gives meaning to your inputs elements. And in this label, I'll just create a comment here. I'll just call this first name. I'll just call this name entirely. Yeah, so this part is for name. And then you use the label tag to create label. And you are going to write, it's like so, first name. But I told you about some elements that have attributes, just like a tag has href attributes, it has targets, your image has src attributes, and so on. So label also has some attributes. And one of the most important attributes is the for attributes. These attributes would tie, whatever you pass in here, it will tie the label to the actual form. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's just say for first name, let's just put it this way. If I save and refresh my browser, you will just see I have first name, but I don't have any input field to type my first name into, right? So what you could do is then create the actual form, the actual input, right? An input tag doesn't have closing like this. It's a self-closing element. So now for first name, we just need a text input, so we can just type the name in. So you have to pass in the type of text, right? And you can give it an ID. An ID is what ties it to this label. So you have to pass in the same name you pass to the label into the ID of the input, and then HTML automatically knows that this label is for this input, right? So you pass in first name as the ID, and then you can also pass in another attribute called name, and the name of this input field is first name, is for first name, right? And we want it to be required. We don't want people to just leave it as empty if they like. So I'll do this and refresh, and we can see that we now have our inputs field, and we can type in, right? And it's required too. If I try to enter, because by default, enter key is translated as submit on your browser, it will tell you, please fill in this field. So we have first name, and this first name right now belongs to these inputs because of the 4 attributes in the label, and that it matches the ID. We'll just do some more and you understand. So I'm going to give a line break. No, oops. I'm going to give a line break, and I'll just duplicate the same thing and do last name. So let's just call this last name, and we'll change this to last, and the ID is last name, and the name of the input is last name. It's also going to be a type of text because it's also for name. And then we have our last name, right? And so on and so forth. So we are going to go ahead and do for email, phone number, age, just to show you guys different types of input fields. This is for email, right? And the title of the label will change to email. But I told you that we have an input type for email, so we can change the type to email, and the ID will be email, and the name will be email, right? I would always refresh after every one, so I don't do everything and then it jam packs. Oh, I didn't put a line break. So you know what? I don't even want this line break here. I want it here. So I want first name and last name to sort of be on the same line, and then email will take the next line, because first name and last name are like in the same group, right? Somehow. So the next one we are looking at is phone number. So basically, you see how we are just creating fields to capture the details of whoever is using our website if they choose to fill. The input type would be telephone for phone, and then the ID and name would be phone to match our label. Then, I mean, we can also give it like a pattern. So I want the phone number to be in a particular pattern, and I want, and then one more thing I want to show, I didn't talk about this, I forgot, boys, the placeholder. This is very important. You see it a lot. Usually, you know, when you're filling a form and you see some faint text behind the form, then when you start typing, it disappears. It's called the placeholder. It just used to guide you, to tell you like this is what you should be typing in the form. So I'll just put a random placeholder here, and then you can see like we have this placeholder, and the moment you start to type anything, it just, you know, it disappears. Have number, yeah, input type of number. We talked about number. This one, I'm just going to call it age. Let's say we want to capture the person's age. I remember when we talked about comments, you see, this is like more what comments are used for. It's not necessarily for just typing away or that you must use it, but sometimes it just helps, you know, define things more clearer while you are writing your code. Instead of looking too far to find out where things are, you could just quickly read the comments on top and know, okay, this is for this specific section, right? So label for age, an input type of number, and then our ID is going to carry the ID of the label, the four value of the label, which is age, and the name is also going to be age. But then maybe we just want to capture a minimum age. Maybe we only want people like, say, 18 and above, and then a maximum of like maybe I don't know, 100. I don't know, maybe 100-year-olds. Yeah, we want that. So we've built out the age form, and you see it's a number. This is more like I'm currently typing on my keyboard. You can't see it, but I'm typing letters and it's not working because this only accepts numbers. But the moment I start to type a number, it accepts numbers. And yeah, you see, I click the down arrow, it starts from 18. So it's going to create an arrow as a guide for you for like increasing the numbers or decreasing the numbers, and it gets to 100 and it stops. But I feel like you can't necessarily rely on these things because sometimes you can still bypass it, because if I go ahead and use my keyboard, why am I still able to type 3, 4, 5, 6? This is where the strength of JavaScript comes in. You can literally use JavaScript to target these forms and enforce what you want to enforce. But you all see this when we get to JavaScript. We have radio buttons. This one we said is used to select only one option from a list of options. So let's look at how radio works. Let's just call this one gender. Let's say we want to get the agenda, and this is a radio button. So this is how to make a radio button. As usual, you put the label. So the label is for gender, right? And then we have our input type. So I mean, you can put a 4, but remember what I said when I said that this 4 here has to be a unique value that would be attached to specific input using the input ID, right? And for this radio button, I don't need to put a 4 in this specific label. I could, but I don't need to, because I don't want to create any button that would match gender, but I want to create a button that would match male or female, because ultimately is male or female I want to send, not the word gender. But you'll see what I mean shortly. So let's update this. So I'm going to have an input type, and of course it's going to be radio. Depending on what you want to do, you have to specify the type. So my ID would be male. Just watch what I'm doing. And my name would be gender. Just follow me, just watch what I'm doing. And my value, there's something called value for radio buttons. Your value would be male. So the value is basically what is going to get sent. So when you're sending your form, this is going, if the person picks this is going to get sent, right? This value is what is going to get sent. So now what I can do, I can put another label down here and say for male. Oops. For male. What's happening with my keyboard today? For male. And then of course type the title out. And then I can do another one. The ID will be female and the value will be female. And then this down label will be for female, and the title of the label will be female, right? Let's refresh and see what we have. So gender is that top label. This one, I just use it to make a title for this field. I don't necessarily care about this in this scenario. What I care about is these buttons. If I click male and I send this form, it's going to pick this value and send together with the rest of the things. If I click female and send the form, it's going to pick this value. There's also a typo here. It's going to pick this value and send with the rest of the form, right? And then it's attached to this label instead of this outside one, right? It's attached by the ID to this label, these inner labels. And these labels, these labels you can see here are this, right? So picture what we've written in your head. We created a first label. We now created our inputs for male, our input type radio. We now created another label under that input type radio for male. We now created another input type radio for female. We now created another label under that input type radio for female. But we did not attach our inputs to this outside label. We attached our inputs to this inside label, because that's ultimately what we are trying to capture. So this label is just to group like gender. Okay, this section is for gender, but ultimately the input field is attached to these inner labels, not this main one. So you see how you can be flexible with things. You can code your stuff to literally behave the way you want it to behave. So these are radio buttons. We have check boxes. We have something like check boxes. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to put this comment here. Check boxes, and let's just say this is for interest. Maybe we want to capture the interests of the people visiting our website. First, we'll have our label, of course, and just like the gender one, I don't want to use this label for instance. I just want to use it to display a section, a title of a section. So I'm not going to put a for attributes. My for attributes will come somewhere else where I'm really interested in attaching the label to the inputs. So we are going to create our checkbox inputs, and the input type, you guessed it, obviously is going to be checkbox. ID, let's just say maybe one of the interests that people might have is photography. Let's just say they're interested in photography, right? And the name is going to be the name of this section, interests. The value is going to be photography. Again, the value is what gets sent to the server, what gets sent to the back end. And so we've created our form, and now I'm going to create this other label. It's going to hold photography, and the for attributes would be, you guessed it, photography. So this is similar to what we've done in radio buttons, but this is checkbox. Now, I'll create another one for travel. So the value will be travel, and the label is going to take travel. This other interest is nature. The value will be nature. The label will be nature, and this will be nature. So now let's refresh and see what we have. So as you can see, we have checkboxes. So if I'm filling this form, I might be interested in photography and travel. I'll just select it. These are my two interests, right? Now let's look at select drop down. I'm just going to call this, I'm just going to put a comment here. Inquiry type, and the field, the type of inputs we are trying to get here is a select drop down, or we are trying to teach here is a select drop down. So label for category. So this label, I'm actually going to attach it to an input field. And I'm just going to put the title as, or the content of the label as inquiry type. Let's just say, yeah. And then select. So for select drop downs, you don't use input type select. You actually have to write it as select. And the ID of this select is going to be category. And the name, you're just going to give the name category. Now, inside of your select element, this is where you now put all the options you want to be inside the drop down. And you literally just call it option. But your option will have a value. And let's just call this general inquiry, right? Maybe we have 3 options. I'll just copy and paste. Feedback. And then we have collaboration. Let's just call this collaboration. I'll refresh, and you can see, so we have inquiry type, and we have, these are the drop downs. So we have general inquiry, feedback, and collaboration, and anyone you select is there. I know all of us have come across this type of forms before where you click and you select something and it stays there. So this is a select drop down. Again, what we've just done is that we create a label, of course, that is going to hold the texts, that is going to guide us to tell us what this form is about, inquiry type. And this label has a for attribute that is supposed to match the input field that you are creating. Now, after the label, you go ahead to create your input field. And for select, the way to create that is to use the select tag. And in the select tag, it has an ID that matches the for attributes in the label, and then a name that would also match. But the ID is ultimately what's most important. Then inside the select element, we now have all the options that we want to appear in the drop down. So basically, this is your label. This box here is your select. This box now is your select, and these three are the options, which is basically what we've done here. Label, your select, and the three options inside it. So even if you want 100 options, you have to put everything inside here. And the value is just like radio box or checkbox. Any value you put inside is what will be sent to make the request. So if you want general to be sent, you have to specify value general and then put a text in front of it that will be displayed. If you want feedback, so different values. So make sure you are putting different things inside here. You're not repeating yourself. And then we talked about file upload. There's an input type for that. Let's go to the next line. An input type for file upload. We are just going to have a look at this. So file upload section. So let's create a label for this, and we'll just call it for file. And the text inside the label will just be upload an image or upload a file or anything you want to put there is fine. And then this one uses input type of, you guessed it, file, because you're just trying to upload a file. ID has to match your label, so ID would be file, and name is going to be file, right? So you have your file, and refresh, and you can now see you have this to upload a file. And if I say choose an image or choose anything, you can now like choose any file. So let me just pick Week3, open, and now our file has been appended and uploaded. So you see how these things work in real life. Yeah. And we have text area. I talked about text area. So let's say I want them to also leave a message if they want. So let's just do text area. And of course, label, you need a label for it. For, let's just call it message. And the content in the label would be message. And the input is going to be text area. So for text area, I use a text area tag, not input. So you see select and text area are kind of a little different from the rest. ID is going to carry the labels for attribute, the for value, because it needs to match, right? Name as well, for consistency, we'll give name message too, for clarity. And then there's something called rows, but you don't necessarily have to pass it. But there's something called rows. You want it to take four lines for now, but you can always resize it, to be honest. There's even columns, as you can see, my assistant is doing that, but I'll just leave it at rows for now. And I'll make this required. So I want you to leave a message. By all means, you must leave a message. So yeah. So if you look at this thing here, you can drag it and it opens more. So just because you said four 4 rows doesn't mean that you can't drag it to take more than 4 rows, but basically it's just like text, but for typing more words, more stuff, so that you can see more things in full. Because this text now, once you type in full into text, you can't necessarily see the rest of the things, right? But text area is for like a bigger, gives you a bigger space to work with. And last but not the least, we are going to look at submit, which is like one of the most important things here. I mean, everything is important, but you almost always need a button to submit, even if you don't need all of this. So submit is just going to be a button element, and the type is going to be of submit. That's it, literally. That's all. Simple. Send message. Also, we talked about that we have a type called reset, right? To clear everything in your form. So let's see if this works. And now we have our 2 buttons. So if I say send message, which is my submit button, you see some of the required fields are telling me that I have to enter something. So if I still try to send, it's still telling me is a required field, enter something. If I reset, it clears everything. If I try to send again, the same thing, fill all your required fields. So let's just go ahead and fill it out. Email, if I say John, send message, it tells me include an @ in the email address. And until it's a valid email before it lets you enter a following part. So I can't still submit this. Let's just say this. Then send message, I still have a required field here, but I'm still going to add a phone number. Let's just say this. Then age, let's say 28, male, interest is photography and nature. What type of inquiry is this person trying to make? Inquiry for collaboration. Choose a file or an image. He uploads his image. Hi, I would like to collaborate. Let's just say this is it. And then send message. Oh, it's not matching the requested format. So maybe I exceeded it. Yeah, so you see, once I say submit, the form, we are not submitting to a real back end now because we don't have a back end yet. But ultimately, if your form passes everything and you say submit, it should let you submit. And this information, everything like this, would be taken to a back end server to be processed or stored. Everything that you have just put in. And then it's once you submit, by default it resets and brings back the form again. So this is just all about forms. You can go back, play around with it, create different types of forms, make your mistakes, try to understand where you're making mistakes and learn from it. But ultimately, these are most of the form fields you encounter when you are making web pages. This brings us to the end of forms. Now, we are going to have a look at, I'll just create a footer just because I'll just use the opportunity to teach footer. So to create a footer, you basically just write the footer elements, or you create the footer elements. And in this footer, maybe I just want to type copyright. I think this is the copyright symbol. To create copyright symbol, that's circled C. Let's just say 2024 beautiful landscapes. Let's just call this our footer, nothing too major. So if we refresh, it should show up here. We see it when we start to do CSS and styling, we are going to bring it all the way to the bottom because footer should always be at the bottom and header should always be at the top. But for now, there was a typo here, but for now, this is what we are going to have as our footer. Beautiful landscapes. And I will just replicate the footer on all the pages because I want we always want our footer on all pages, right? Or your footer is usually on every single page. So yeah, so we have our footer everywhere else. So if we go home, now our footer should be there at the end, at the bottom, and portfolio footer should also be there. So the next thing we'll be looking at is our tables. So I'll just use the portfolio page to show us how to make tables. So in portfolio.html, we already have like a basic doc type, head, and the rest, but we still want to include our tables, and we want to convert some of these elements to semantic elements. So instead of div and the rest, we want to use proper semantic elements. So I want my navigation back here because I don't want to have to use the back buttons. So I'm going to include my navigation again back in my portfolio page, and yeah, I should have it. So I have home twice. So yes, this one. And then after that, we have our main. In here, the next thing to do, since we have gone in for semantic elements, this div, I would rather change it to a main instead of a div. And main is just going to hold everything. Main is like my main container. It's just like a div, but it just has more meaning. So it's going to hold everything from top to the end. Yeah. And then I'm going to create, I'll just leave this H3 here. But before this, I'll create a section. Yeah. And then I'll put this H3 inside and call it our portfolio. Just same way everything is, including this one too. I think I'll put this one inside as well. Welcome to our portfolio, where we showcase stunning landscapes from all over the world. And inside of this, I'm going to add an H4 tag, and I'll just call it featured projects. I don't want to delete our list. I still feel like it's important to be part of our work. Like we need to have some sort of list. I'm going to still keep my list, but I'm going to put them in a separate section. So basically I have two sections on our portfolio page. This first section is going to hold a table, and this second section is already holding a list, right? So I'm just going to leave it this way. But yeah. So now in this first section, I want to build out our tables. So the first thing you need, like I said initially, is the table tag, which is the main container for it. And everything has its own attributes. So one of the attributes for this is the border attributes, which I'm going to give it now. And I'll just say border of 1, and it's going to put a border around the table with like 1 pixels. When you start doing CSS, you understand what measurements are, but pixel is a common measurement that states how thick a line is, or like a font size, how thick or how big or how bold or how small or faint it is. So 1, just I want a simple line across around my table. And then we have something called the table head. In my table head, I'm going to specify all my headings, what I want my headings to be. For now, I just want 3 headings. I don't want a lot of headings. And inside here, the first heading, project name, the second heading will be description, and the third heading will be location. And the last one is location. So these are my 3 headings. So basically, table is the main container. TH is your table head that specifies the main header of your table, just like header in our page. And then TR is called a table row. So ideally, you already know what a table looks like. A table is a combination of columns and rows. Columns are the vertical ones, and rows are horizontal. They go left to right. Columns go top to down. We have to wrap them in a TR. TR means table row, because although all of the project names will come under here, and all of the description will come under here, and all of the location will come under here, 3 of them have to still be on a row on their own to create the headers. So just think of it this way. 3 of them are in a TR, which is a row. Rows go left to right. So that's why we want all of them to go left to right. But ultimately, they are all inside a table head. It would make sense the more you practice, but just understand that table is the main container to hold everything. T head is for your table head. TR means table row, right? And rows go left to right, columns go up to down, and under each of these column, right, under each of this head, you would have all of the individual data that concerns them. So let's just add one more information inside, and it might make a little bit of sense. So now we have T body, which is like your table body. This is where you're now going to start filling all this information in. So we are going to declare another row. So this row is for the first row of data. And inside here, we have TD. TD is table data. And I'll just call this mountain peaks. And for the description, I'll call it collection of breathtaking mountain views. And then for the location, let's just say is in Himalayas. Let's just say that this is a location, right? This is a place, Himalayas. So let's refresh. So do you now see the whole idea? So we had the first TR, although this TR is in a table head, that's why it's bold. But the first TR, the first row, is basically all of our headings. The second TR is now the second row that make up all of the information for this. But they are not in a heading, so they are not bold. They are in a TD. TD is the data now. So they are not bold. So if we want to add another new row, all we just simply need to do is duplicate this. And let's call this ocean shore. And then we are going to say, let's say the location is Maldives. And then beautiful ocean shores photographed. All right. So if I refresh, now you can see we have a new row inside here. And so on. So you can add as much information as you want. So look, I want you to look at tables in terms of rows. So everything here is a row. Everything is treated as a row. The heading is treated as a row. Let's just do a last one. We are almost done. We have just 6 minutes to go. And then I'll just say mystical forest full of life and adventure or something like that. Just refresh it and it creates a new row. So everything is basically a new row from the heading to the main data. The difference between this row and these other rows is that this one is wrapped in a heading before the row, and then these ones are wrapped in a body. That's the whole idea of how you create a table, right? We have other ones, other attributes, but I'm not going to touch too much on them, but I'll just do one to show you how to create like row spans and column spans. So basically, row span, you create it when you want something to span multiple rows or multiple columns. So let's call it more projects coming soon. And then we are going to pass an attribute of call span, and let's just call it 3. Let's just specify 3 there and see what it looks like. And as you can see, this one goes everywhere. It spans 1, 2, and 3 columns. It didn't create like a division between the columns. It just took the whole 3 columns. And we have things like row span, but basically this is just how to create a simple table. And you can see that it depicts data better. It presents data a lot better. Of course, we can style this table with CSS when we get to CSS. But for now, I just wanted to show you how to create a basic table. And finally, I think the only thing left is that I was going to update the home page to use a semantic element. But then again, I feel like I would like you guys to go home and do the same thing. Next week, by God's grace, when we come in, you would have seen that I would have done mine, but I would like to see what you can do on your own. So all of these div, span, and the rest, I would expect that you've updated them to use semantic elements. As you can see, I've updated some of them already in this file, so you can just make reference. So we have header, nav, and all our links are sitting in here. So I'd expect that this is already updated. Same thing with your div. Just find a way to use header, nav, main, section, footer, and the rest as opposed to non-semantic elements. But that would be all for this week and for this class. Bye, everyone.